Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a massive, absolutely fascinating shift in human behavior, something I like to call the spectrum of sovereignty. We're going to trace how the urge to operate entirely outside the system has evolved over the decades. We're talking about a journey that starts in gritty, street-level cash economies and scales all the way up to the highly sophisticated, fully legal global compliance strategies used by today's digital nomads. It is a monumental shift, and we are going to break down exactly how we got here, relying entirely on the source materials we've gathered.
Okay, let's dive into this. Look at this quote from Jordan L. Cooper's manual Shadow Merchant. It just perfectly captures the raw, working-class frustration that really birthed the modern shadow economy. We aren't starting this story with high-level corporate tax havens. We're starting with pure, everyday economic desperation. It's that incredibly relatable desire to escape a bad boss or an oppressive job that pushes regular people to figure out how to make money outside the official, heavily regulated system.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer scale of it all. In his writings on counter-economics, Samuel Edward Konkin III cites a U.S. news report pointing out that up to 20 million Americans were operating in this underground economy. 20 million! I mean, that is absolutely not a fringe movement. That's a massive parallel economy, made up of people moonlighting, selling goods at swap meets, and doing off-the-books work just to survive.
Section 1. The Shadow Economy Roots. Let's look at the analog origins.
To really wrap our heads around this first theme, we've got to look at how pragmatism birthed the shadow merchant. Cooper's perspective is that the underground economy started simply as a survival tool. Successful retailing back then didn't require a storefront, it didn't need massive capital, and you certainly didn't need offshore accounts. It was totally physical and driven entirely by a willingness to hustle for cash. Cooper actually shares this fascinating example in his book about a guy named Joe. Joe was out of work, so he just went out, bought some stencils and spray paint, and started painting house numbers on curbs for $1 a pop. He walked away with a net profit of $17 in just a couple of hours. That ground-level hustle contrasts so sharply with the highly monitored digital tax systems we navigate today. Back then, you could quite literally just grab some paint, earn cash, and totally bypass the system.
Section 2. Counter-economics and ideology. Moving from hustle to ideology.
So the crucial point here is how basic survival evolved into a deliberate political statement. Samuel Edward Konkin III coined this radical framework he called counter-economics, which he defined as any human action taking place without the approval of the state. Under this ideological umbrella, things like dodging tariffs, ignoring business regulations, or evading taxes get completely redefined. Instead of calling them crimes, Konkin frames them as moral, non-coercive acts of defiance against an establishment economy that, in his view, just couldn't support regular people.
But here's the thing. This ideology didn't just stay on the streets with the working class. When we synthesize Konkin's working-class rebellion with Mark Nessman's lifeboat strategy, we see how this entire concept scales up to the ultra-wealthy. While Konkin was focused on swap meets and private cash plots, Nessman explains how the elite use offshore entities, corporate vehicles, and expatriate living as literal lifeboats for their wealth. They are basically using their vast resources to throw legal and financial obstacles right in the path of government bureaucrats, effectively buying the exact same privacy and autonomy that the street-level shadow merchant tries to scrape together with cash.
Section 3. Perpetual Travelers and Flags. Let's talk about the flag theories. And this brilliantly illustrates the massive shift in how people view sovereignty. Look at the contrast here. Back in the 1980s and 90s, W.G. Hill's perpetual traveler concept was incredibly hostile. He advised getting dual citizenship and constantly moving across borders so no single government could ever pin you down as a tax resident. It was a total evasion mindset. Now, fast forward to Ali Byatt's modern 7-flag strategy from Forbes. Byatt takes those exact same multi-jurisdictional principles, but he flips them into a tool for optimization and legal compliance. It's no longer about hiding in the shadows. It's a corporate-friendly framework built on resilience, where you diversify your life across nations for maximum legal leverage.
So why did that shift to compliance happen? Well, Olivier Wagner's U.S. Taxes for Worldly Americans completely shatters W.G. Hill's old illusion of frictionless, consequence-free travel. Wagner points out a really stark reality. If you try to live as a sovereign digital nomad today and just ignore your U.S. tax filings, your own government can legally revoke your passport. The very mobility that a perpetual traveler relies on is literally weaponized against them to force compliance.
Section 4. physical and digital invisibility. Let's get into Operation Security.
Let's move to this next concept and see how the OPSEC, or Operation Security, battleground really escalates across our sources. Step 1. Edmund Pankow writes about hiding your assets in plain sight, but even he admits it's failing because investigators can so easily mine public records now. Step 2. Michael Bazell takes it further, advocating for active disinformation. He uses canary tokens, which are trackable digital files that act as tripwires, alerting you the moment someone searches for your data. Then we hit Step 3. David Haywood Young represents the extreme end. If you are handling sensitive data, he says you need to transmit it via the Tor network on a brand new laptop and then literally physically destroy that laptop immediately afterward.
We really need to analyze this methodological conflict deeply because it's fascinating. You've got Pankow and Bazell trying to outsmart the system from the inside by manipulating the data that exists about them in databases. But Kevin Mitnick and David Haywood Young take a much darker, more intense view. Mitnick points out that modern governments rely on massive bulk data surveillance. Young basically assumes that any device you own is already inherently compromised by state actors. So to them, manipulation just isn't enough anymore. They argue that to maintain true invisibility today, you have to rely on hard cryptographic encryption and absolute physical isolation, like destroying your hardware.
Section 5. Modern Nomad Tax Traps. Time to talk about the 183-day rule.
Which brings us to a major theme of today's landscape, the modern trap. The 2026 Digital Nomad Visas Guide highlights this brilliant commodification of the desire to escape the system. We're at a point where over 65 countries offer specific visas just for remote workers. But here is the catch, the 183-day rule. If you stay in a country for more than 183 days, congratulations, you've just become a tax resident, and the rates vary wildly. While the UAE offers a 0% rate, Spain might tax you at 24%, and Portugal could take up to 48% of your worldwide income. So many nomads falsely assume the visa makes them exempt. Instead, the state has built this highly efficient system that legally absorbs unwary perpetual travelers straight back into the formal global tax base.
And it's not just about the rules. The enforcement mechanisms are incredibly sophisticated now. The Digital Nomad Tax Guide lists some highly specific audit triggers that will get you caught. Claiming to be stateless on forms, having social media posts that mismatch your declared residency, or just having inconsistent addresses across your bank accounts and visa applications. These data points really prove that Konkin's low-tech anonymity and even Nessman's high-tech evasion strategies are largely incompatible with today's interconnected data surveillance. The system is watching everywhere.
Section 6. The Compliance Divide. Welcome to the era of sanctioned arbitrage.
Synthesizing this entire journey brings the whole transformation into incredibly sharp focus. Think about where we started. We had Hill and Konkin, whose underground economics were rooted in deep ideological hostility toward the state, a true desire for radical rebellion. Fast forward to today, and that gritty 1990s anti-tax underground has been completely neutralized. It's been transformed by experts like Ali Bayat into a premium legal commodity. Sovereignty today isn't about hiding in the shadows with spray paint. It's sanctioned arbitrage. It's about leveraging the laws of multiple countries to legally optimize your taxes and your lifestyle, fully out in the open, by the book.
So I want to leave you with this provocative question to really chew on. Have we achieved true sovereignty? Or have we just built ourselves a much more luxurious cage? I mean, we went from painting curbs for off-the-books cash to paying 0% taxes in the UAE on a specialized visa, but at the same time, we are vastly more tracked, monitored, and regulated than ever before. I highly encourage you to examine your own digital footprint and think critically about your own compliance strategies. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.